Today is Thursday, September 11th, 2025. This is Quick Start from CBN News. I'm Dan Antros. The manhunt for Charlie Kirk's killer continues. We'll have that top story today on the podcast, where we bring you news from a Christian perspective. Make sure you're subscribing and all of the things we ask you each and every day. Our email address is quickstartpodcast@cbn.org. Joining me today to go through this horrible news day, CBN's Billy Hallowell and Trey Goins-Phillips. We're going to get to everything going on with the relation to the Charlie Kirk assassination. On the Focus story, we are going to talk about reaction pouring in across America as we witnessed a tragedy yesterday, guys.
As we're sitting here, on 9/11, thinking about a national tragedy, the nation's experiencing another really horrific moment. And I think it's hard to process these things when they unfold. It really is, because they're so emotional and painful, and they bring up so many conversations about what's happening deeper in our country.
Absolutely. And on the main thing, there's a disturbing pattern going on that many people might not want to point out. And we're going to talk about that coming up on the main thing. We're going to get to all of that and more coming up in 30 seconds.
My papa says the Messiah isn't real. He's just a story.
So what do you believe?
From the Salvation Poem Project comes Light of the World.
I really liked that movie.
You're really going to want your fam to see this. It's Jesus' life, so clear and so fun.
I want to see it again.
See the hand-drawn animated film everyone's talking about.
He's the king of all kings!
He's nothing.
He is the light of the world.
Light of the World. Now playing in theaters. Rated PG.
And we're going to get to the news now in 90 seconds. And the manhunt has widened after the UVU rooftop shooting that killed Charlie Kirk. The suspect is not in custody yet, still on the loose. Investigators are seeking new leads. There was confusion in the first 24 hours. 2 different persons of interest were detained and later released. Officials are saying now the killer is remaining at large. New enhanced video shows a figure sprinting across the roof of UVU's Losi Center moments after the shot, consistent with police saying the round likely came from an elevated position about 140 to 200 yards away. Charlie Kirk was 31, and he was conducting his patented Q&A style type events on the first stop of his America Comeback Tour, when a single round struck his neck shortly after noon local time on Wednesday, September 10th. Campus was cleared and later closed. FBI and Utah authorities are treating it as a targeted attack, with officials saying it was a political assassination, and they're urging the public to submit any photos or videos or tips to aid the search. President Trump called it a dark moment for America, honoring Kirk as a patriotic voice for young conservatives and vowing accountability for everyone who contributed to this atrocity. Guys, this is obviously the big news stories of the day, and I think this is going to potentially be, ironically, a turning point in the country. The name of Charlie Kirk's organization, Turning Point USA. And there are just so many layers to this, guys, but I'll start by saying this kind of violence is just horrific and never the answer for anything. And again, ironic that Charlie's main mission in life was having these conversations. He felt that the country was better off when people discussed these things, and he did so in a friendly, nice manner. Charlie Kirk was the nice guy. Whether you liked his political ideas or not, he was a guy that was friendly to everyone and was just trying to have conversations with people who disagreed with him. He liked doing that. He felt like it was necessary for the country to thrive, and that we would kind of devolve into violence if we didn't do that. And before I get your reaction, guys, I want to play this clip that I saw yesterday of Charlie being asked, this is at an unknown date, but Charlie was being asked about why he does this. There was a woman that came up who wasn't familiar with him, and she was like, why do you do this? And here's his answer. It's just barely under a minute long, but I think it speaks volumes. Listen to this.
I go around universities and have challenging conversations, and because that's what is so important to our country, is to find our disagreements respectfully, because when people stop talking, that's when violence happens.
I've never seen someone do this.
Well, it's a growing trend because people like me are facing violence, assaults. The left. Yes, the campus Antifa. I've been stormed out of restaurants. I've been assaulted publicly, multiple death threats.
Okay, so what's your goal in all this?
There's more people that agree with me than some people would actually believe, and they come out of the woodwork when I do stuff like this. We record all of it so that we put on the internet so people can see these ideas collide. When people stop talking, that's when you get violence. That's when civil war happens, because you start to think the other side is so evil and they lose their humanity.
Just chilling words to hear after what happened yesterday. And it's incredible. And I've seen a lot of people say this, guys, that what this was an admission that apparently your ideas are so bad that they can't be discussed. And the only way to further your idea is to silence opposing ideas. And there's a lot to say, but I'll just leave it there for now and turn it over to you.
There's so many things to say today. I don't want to oversimplify what's happening in this country, from a broader scale. But when you look at we used to laugh about the snowflake, syndrome and the people who couldn't handle other ideas, but it feels like we're at a place where other ideas somehow spark people into a violent state. And of course, we know that these people are not spiritually or mentally well when they do these things, because you have to be completely detached from reality to do anything like this. But when you have a person who's out there speaking about things, if you disagree with that person, why don't you go counter what they have to say? Why don't you use your brain and think? The idea that we would gun people down because we don't agree with what they're saying is so otherworldly and bizarre to me. And I think somebody like Charlie, who, he said things I'm sure that some people find controversial because they disagree with him. That's life. We have a First Amendment. This is a person who, as you said, Dan, built his life and his entire career on having conversations with people. And as he said in that clip, not being violent, not, resorting to that, using words and using knowledge and logic. And to watch this happen is just unbelievably horrifying.
First and foremost, the actions taken against Charlie Kirk are evil and demonic and the result of spiritual darkness, right? I mean, I think that is apparent. But I think a lot of it is born out of a social media culture that we have reinforced a lot of that spiritual lostness by reducing a human being to nothing more than a walking post that I disagree with. And you see people getting more and more ginned up over things like you were just saying, Billy, to the point where everybody is dehumanized. You're just somebody, you are an object for me to hate. Words are violence. That's something that we've been hearing over the last, I guess, decade to 15 years. And I think that this is downstream of that. This is what comes of that when you equate ideas that I disagree with violence against me. And then you have more and more hatred and vitriol stirred up on social media that eventually a person, it's insane, but I think that's the trajectory of all of this, that a person can get to the point of hating somebody so strongly that they would steal a father and a husband of just 31 years old.
Honestly, this happens almost every time that we see one of these assassinations or assassination attempts. We saw it after President Trump's attempted assassination back when he was candidate Trump. And you saw people say, the guy from Tenacious D with Jack Black saying, don't miss next time and things like that. And I thought, okay, surely we're past that. But now they're coming out of the woodwork and you're seeing people getting fired from their jobs today for essentially blaming Charlie Kirk for his own death. And saying, well, you speak hate and you're going to get hate. And that's not at all what he speaks. And I think this goes to the lies that people are being told and the exaggerations that are out there where a disagreement with your view has become, now you're a hate monger. Now you're a bigot. That rhetorical trick and game it's no longer funny, guys, because look at what people are doing. They're believing you. Now, I'm never one to blame the actions of a crazy person on rhetoric. You should be sane enough to not shoot someone because of what a politician says about rhetoric. But I think it really is time for politicians, particularly on the left, who yell Nazi, 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 fascism all day long about anyone who disagrees with them. With the trans issue, if you disagree with them, well, you're harming trans people, you're killing trans people because you disagree with this. That is a lie. That is false. And look what it's doing to people. Look what it is doing. It's causing them to think that there's no other option except for political violence. And this is a horrible trend for our country to go down.
What does the enemy try to do? The enemy tries, and I want everybody to refocus on this. We have to look at Ephesians 6. We talk about this chapter all the time on the show. The enemy comes to kill, to steal, to destroy, to confuse. That is the hallmark of what is happening in culture. And those are the things that lead a person into a place where they're willing to do something like this, right? It is not just that we have physical things going on. We have spiritual things that influence us. And when you create a culture that is bent on all the things that you just said, and I agree 100%, I am never one to say that person did it because of someone else. You're responsible for your actions. But we are, as you were saying, Trey, too, we have created a culture that is so pent up and anxious and panicked over every issue. And we say, well, that person's a racist. That person's a homophobe. That person's so evil. Their words are so evil that we don't even deserve to have them here at some point. And that is the ideology that gets inculcated in all of that. And I think we're watching this happen again and again and again. Are we going to keep denying that we've created this culture? It is. I mean, I think about his kids. I think about his wife. I think all of us have really struggled just thinking through what is lost here. This is a person. These aren't caricatures. This is a human being with a real life.
Yeah. And Trey, I like what you said about a walking post. That's what people have become, a walking social media post. And apparently that's dehumanizing because they're feeling like they can just hit delete at some point. And some people take that to the extreme, and it's just a horrible trend. And I think why I play that clip of Charlie talking about the importance of talking about ideas, because that's what America's founded on, talking about these ideas. And to your point, Billy, on how God created us, and you think of Galatians 5, and we've not been given a spirit of fear, but a spirit of love and power and self-control. And that's what we should be aiming for as Christians. And I think you largely see that, right? That Christians don't panic over things because our ultimate high point is not the government. And then if the government has people in it we don't like, we panic because that's our highest authority. When God is your highest authority, you can rest in peace knowing that God is in control. So, it's just a troubling trend.
Yeah. I mean, something that's been encouraging even in these last few hours, because there's so much to say, and there's so much of it that is just, it's all senseless and is heartbreaking. But I've just been thinking in the last several hours about Charlie, and I never met him. I didn't interact with him personally, but I watched him and knew several people who did know him. Billy, I know that you have interacted with him some in the past, but just to see, because he was only 31, right? To see somebody who grew up on the public stage, in the public eye, and seeing his rhetoric soften over the years, and his focus shift. Obviously, politics was still something very front and center in his career, and that was something that he cared about. But even our CBN's David Brody, he talked about, Charlie talked about political things, but he started and he ended pretty much every single event with Jesus. And to see that shift in Charlie as he began to take his faith more seriously in the latter part of his very young career at 31 has been a huge encouragement. And I've just been thinking about 1 Corinthians 15, 55 through 57. It says, "O death, where is your victory? O death, where is your sting? For sin has the sting that results in death, and the law gives sin its power. But thank God he gives us victory over sin and death through our Lord Jesus Christ." And I just think right now we're feeling those left behind, and those who are wondering what on earth happened, and just feeling that righteous indignation. We're feeling that sting, but I'm comforted to know that Jesus has satisfied that sting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts, Billy?
Yeah, I do want to say this because I made the mistake a few years ago after meeting Charlie and kind of watching him, of assuming that he was driven primarily or mostly by politics. That was the thought that I had at the time, which is fine. But then as I got to know a little bit more of what he was doing, and I started to see the TP Faith arm and do a little bit of work with them and doing some speaking with them, and then watching him. Earlier this year, he did an onstage interview with Alan Jackson, a pastor down in Nashville. And it was mesmerizing to watch how biblically literate and Charlie Kirk was somebody, as he has said in numerous clips, who loved the Lord. And politics aside, his most important thing that he wanted to be remembered for was his faith. And so I came to understand that this was a person who had a deep faith and was deeply motivated by it. And so when I look at those clips of him saying, I want to be remembered for that, I think of James 4:14, which basically says, what is your life? You're a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. And I think, we have such limited time. And I think he really was using his time on this earth, dying at 31. It's just unimaginable. But he accomplished more for the kingdom in those 31 years than most people do in an entire life. And so I just wanted to say that because I think just reflecting on him, he is going to be remembered, I think, for that more than anything.
Yeah, and those clips are going around, and that's what I was starting to see. My algorithm probably bends a little bit towards faith content, a little bit more towards faith content than a lot of people because just of what I look up. And so he would pop up on there a lot, and I'd see him making the case for the gospel. He'd be making the case for why he believes in Christianity, and he did it very, very well. And so that's why you saw a lot of people yesterday saying, God, Charlie is with God now. He is probably hearing the words, well done, good and faithful servant, because of that very thing. He was unashamed about the gospel. Well, this is obviously going to be a big news story this week, and we're going to continue covering it on CBN News. And we have a disturbing pattern that's emerged with all of the political violence that's been happening lately, and we talk about that coming up in 30 seconds.
My papa says the Messiah isn't real. He's just a story.
So what do you believe?
From the Salvation Poem Project comes Light of the World.
I really liked that movie.
You're really going to want your fam to see this. It's Jesus' life, so clear and so fun.
I want to see it again.
See the hand-drawn animated film everyone's talking about.
He's the king of all kings!
He's nothing.
He is the light of the world.
Light of the World. Now playing in theaters. Rated PG.
Charlie Kirk's murder has sent just a shockwave through the country in the last several hours, and people are processing it. And it's part of a disturbing pattern here in the last several years of political violence. And there's something about a lot of the political violence that we're seeing happening, the targeted political violence that we're seeing happening, that perhaps a lot of the mainstream media is not going to address. And Billy and Trey are here with me to discuss it. And Billy, I know you've taken a look at some of the things that have happened, some of the violence that has happened, the assassination attempts, and there's a pattern here that perhaps might be uncomfortable for a lot of people to want to bring up as to what is going on.
Yeah, I think there's two dynamics happening here. And the Family Research Council, they recently, and I think we talked about it here on the show, but they recently put out a report looking at attacks or acts of hostility towards U.S. churches, right? So you have churches being one area we can look at. And there's a very disturbing trend. There have been 1,384 acts of hostility against churches from 2018 to 2024. Then you have this other dynamic that we obviously are talking about on the show here, which is really seeing, and it's not solely targeted to conservatives, but more often it feels we're seeing Republican and conservative candidates, politicians, personalities who are being targeted. It's really bizarre. But I think to start with the churches, think about the last couple of shootings that we've had, right? The last few big ones. One of them, if we go back to 2023, there was a mass shooting at the Covenant School, right, down in Tennessee. That was absolutely horrifying. You had a transgender identifying individual going in and, committing that shooting. You just recently at Annunciation Catholic School, at a mass in Minneapolis, had children, again, in that case, you had a trans identifying individual attacking that church in the middle of a mass, shooting children and others through a window. It feels very much like there is this increased assault on the churches. And so I would start there, because I think if you think back to when Roe v. Wade was about to be overturned, when the leak happened and the Supreme Court leak was there, and you had immediately pro-life pregnancy centers in churches were reporting attacks. Almost immediately, there were 80 some odd attacks that year, right before we even got the official word from the Supreme Court. So there's been a move in this direction. You then had President Donald Trump, right before, as he's running for his second term, obviously in Butler, Pennsylvania, horrifying event, then a second attempt. And now you have Charlie Kirk. I mean, there's a pattern here that is deeply troubling, is there not?
Yeah. And I think while there is violence on all sides of the spectrum, right there, that is happening. But when you see this many incidents targeted in this direction, it certainly should make the country, you see the country and the media at large discuss other patterns or other perceived patterns that they see, particularly with what they say is police violence targeted at Black individuals. And that's been debated. That topic has been debated a lot. And you see it a lot whenever something like an incident pops up. But what we don't see is anyone bothering to point out this trend. And I think with the murder of the Ukrainian refugee who fled war, the 23-year-old woman who was on the train and got murdered, that conversation was starting to come up. Hey, how come the media has ignored this? Why are they ignoring this pattern here and this trend? And so that's a little bit separate from what you're talking about. That one was more of the race discussion that's coming up in that one. But this is also something, and I think it is certainly something that should at least be talked about. And as of right now, it's kind of swept under the rug.
There have been, you had the Nancy Pelosi at her home with her husband. You had that. There were just two other politicians who were Democrats who were killed. So I don't want to pretend that it's not happening at all on the other side. But I also want to remind everybody, June 14th, 2017, a mass shooting that targeted the annual congressional baseball game as the Republicans were practicing. That was another big event. You can't have a functional society and country where one side more than the other is being targeted and with assassination attempts. I mean, it's unsustainable. So that event I just wanted to mention too, because that was another horrifying one.
Well, and one other thing is the Christian churches that have been targeted by arsons. And we've seen these sorts of attacks, the vandalism and attacks targeted at churches, hundreds of incidents for over a span of a couple of years. And that had people, and we reported on that a lot, that's another part of that trend. So it certainly is something that should be talked about more than it is.
Even the way that we talk about and grieve publicly the deaths of people like Charlie Kirk and these Democrats in Minnesota and the Annunciation shooting, even the conversations we have around them reinforce troubling behaviors that we as on social media that we often propagate. I think this like knee-jerk reaction, especially with Charlie, I have to start my post about it being terrible that he has died with, I didn't agree with him on this. Or even Luigi Mangione killing the United Healthcare CEO. Well, the United Healthcare CEO was awful. I just want to say that he was a horrible human being, but it was wrong that he was killed. Like, we don't need to qualify evil. Like, evil is evil. And I think that is part of the problem, right? We're just reinforcing that dehumanization of another human being, even in how we grieve these situations. So I think the trend that you're noticing, Billy, is 100% there and worth talking about. But I think another issue is the ways that we are grieving these people who have been killed, especially assassinated, as Charlie was.
Yeah, I think it's indicative of the reason of why it even gets to this point in the first place. If you're able to celebrate the death of somebody, that means you don't really value their life in any way, shape, or form. And I just want to run through, Billy, because as you said, after the Roe decision, the pregnancy centers were targeted, and Lakewood Church had somebody open fire there. There's so many incidents that happened at these pro-life centers, at churches, that you almost forget some of them because the media didn't seem to care.
This is demonic behavior. Like, it is absolutely evil and demonic to cheer anybody's death. I don't understand why we have to have these qualifiers, you know. Well, like you were saying, Trey, he was a terrible person, you know, but it's like and here's the other thing, our culture has been so bent on, and I don't, again, want to oversimplify things, but you have to put all the pieces together. It's a puzzle, right? And this is a puzzle in which America has made a lot of decisions where we will say, we want to push faith to the side. We want to push prayer to the side. We don't want to talk about God. All of the things that are eternal, that point to our value and that God created us in his image, that we have a deeper purpose, that we're accountable to him. When we push all of that to the side and then we go and we teach children that, you know, they're an accident, that this all just came from a poof of smoke magically, you know, out of nowhere, you really have a situation where worth and value and truth are so diminished that it becomes easier when these moments happen for people to be detached, for people to feel like, well, what is the purpose? And so I think we have this deeper crisis that is festering under, really at the baseline of all of this. It's affecting a lot of things. And I think it even affects situations like this.
Yeah, absolutely. And listen, I think one other interesting note I want to add on this, to, you know, talking about the qualifiers and everything else that people are putting on when they have to mention this, the New York Yankees actually had a moment of silence for Charlie Kirk before their game last night. And it just said, remembering Charlie Kirk on the screen, and on their social media post, it just said, Kirk founded the youth activist group Turning Point USA and become a fixture on college campuses. Charlie Kirk, a husband and father of 2 children, was 31 years old. And it seems like maybe the obvious thing that should be happening in the country when something as momentous as this happens. But what we've seen from professional sports franchises is only a willingness to acknowledge leftist sort of ideas and people that have been impacted. And so for them to do this, I thought was the right thing to do. And they took flack from it in their comments for all the other reasons that you guys were saying. But that is I mean, that's what Charlie wanted. Charlie wanted people to discuss ideas and to see each other as humans first, as children of God first, and then let's debate these ideas. And this, you know, this conversation is going to go on, but I think this trend is an important one, Billy, to point out, and you're right to point it out, because there's a lot going on there underneath the surface as to why that is. And I have a feeling that we are only just very much beginning to scratch the surface on that. But appreciate you bringing that to the podcast today. All right, that's going to leave us with time on the podcast today for one last thing.
This verse is just, I think, a comfort with everything we just talked about. 1 Thessalonians 4, verses 13 and 14, it says, "But we do not want you to be uninformed, brothers, about those who are asleep, that you may not grieve as others do who have no hope. For since we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so, through Jesus, God will bring with him those who have fallen asleep."
You know, that is a reminder of how we're to grieve in the midst of this, right? And it's so difficult because you feel that pain and the human emotion, but remembering too that, you know, Charlie Kirk is with Jesus, and that is a comfort in the midst of the pain.
Yeah, absolutely. And Paul here writing to those who are doubting the resurrection, and clearly the implication of that is that we also will be risen again with Christ when we're in Christ. So a great hope for Christians in the midst of a troubling time. Everyone, be praying for America. Be praying for Charlie Kirk's family. God bless. We'll see you back here next time.